Objective 3. Determine and interpret quartiles. The most common percentiles are quartiles, which divide data sets into fourths, or 4 equal parts. The first quartile, denoted Q subscript 1, divides the bottom 25% of the data from the top 75%. The second quartile, Q subscript 2, divides the bottom 50% of the data from the top 50%. The third quartile, Q subscript 3, divides the bottom 75% of the data from the top 25%. So let's take a look at this diagram here. Okay, so here's quartile 1. This represents 25% of the data, which is 25% of the bottom. Okay, and here would be the smallest data value. Okay, if we take a look at quartile 2, this is also the median, and this represents 50% of the data, because if we take our 25%, okay, if we take our 25% and add these together, we get 25% plus 25%, which gives us the 50% that they're talking about here. And that divides the bottom, here it divides the bottom 50% of the data from the top 50%. Because over here, we can look here, and this is 25% plus 25%, which is equal to the 50%. So this is the bottom 50%, and on the right is the top 50%. Okay, and then what we're going to do is now we're looking at the quartile 3. Well, here's quartile 3. Okay, and so what does quartile 3 tell us? Well, quartile 3 divides the bottom 75%. So if we take a look at the bottom 75%, that means we're taking 25% plus 25% plus 25%, which gives us 75%, and that separates the bottom to the top 25% of the data. Okay, now how do we go about this? Well, in order to find quartiles, step 1, we first have to arrange the data in ascending order. Step 2, we're going to determine the median M, or the second quartile Q2. Step 3, we're going to divide the data set into 2 halves. The observations less than the median and the observations greater than the median. Now the first quartile, Q1, is the median of the bottom half, and the third quartile, Q3, is the median of the top half. Do not include median in these halves. Now, explaining the steps in finding quartiles. So again, to find the second quartile, find the median of the data set. To find the first quartile, determine the median of the lower half of the data set. And then finally, to find the third quartile, determine the median of the upper half of the data set. Now, caution. Now, the steps just given for finding quartiles agree with the method used by the TI graphing calculators. Now, what about StatCrunch? It will agree with StatCrunch when the number of observations is even. However, if the number of observations is odd, StatCrunch will give slightly different results. So believe it or not, there are about 20 different methods that may be used to find quartiles. Okay, so let's take a look at this example here. Finding and interpreting quartiles. The Highway Loss Data Institute routinely collects data on collision coverage claims. Collision coverage insures against physical damage to an insured individual's vehicle. Table below represents a random sample of 18 collision coverage claims based on data obtained from the Highway Loss Data Institute for 2007 models. Find and interpret the first, second, and third quartiles for collision coverage claims. So here is our data. Okay, so over here, here's our data to the left. Step 1, we want to write the data in ascending order. So we're starting with the small one, which goes from 180, 189, and then goes all the way to 21,147. So again, step 1, we're going to write the data in ascending order. In step 2, there are n is equal to 18 observations. So how many observations we have? 18, which means that it's even. It's an even number, so the median, or the second quartile, is the mean of the 9th and the 10th observation, since those are the two middle numbers. So let's take a look at the two middle numbers, which are those two. Okay, so in order to find the median, or we also call it quartile 2, we're going to take 1657 and add 1953 and divide it by 2. And that gives us a median of 1,805, or quartile 2 is equal to 1,805. Okay, now in step 3, we need to separate the bottom and the top half of the data. So we need to look at the median of the bottom half of the data. So this is the bottom half of the data. So if you look here, here is the bottom half of the data. Okay? And so the bottom half of the data goes from 180 to 1,657. And the middle number, Q1, is going to represent the 5th observation. So Q1 is equal to 735. Okay? Next, we now need to find the median of the top half of the data, which is the 3rd quartile. So if we take a look at the top half of the data, which is those numbers, here is our data for the top half. Now again, it's the middle number, which is the 5th observation. So Q3 is going to equal 4,668. So let's interpret this result. For the first quartile, 25% of the collision claims are going to be less than $735. And 75% of the collision claims are going to be greater than the $735. For the second quartile, 50% of the collision claims are going to be less than or equal to 1,805, and 50% of the collision claims are greater than 1,805. And then for the third quartile, 75% of the collision claims are going to be less than or equal to 4,668, and 25% of the collision claims are greater than 4,668.